Contend.
Contend.
3 armed groups are contending for power.
Inevitably, fights break out between the members of contending groups. Inevitably, fights break out between the members of contending groups.
Some astronomers contend that the universe may be younger than previously thought. The rescue team also had bad weather conditions to contend with. The rescue team also had bad weather conditions to contend with.
Contender.
Contender.
A contender for the title. Her album is a strong contender for the Album of the Year award. Her album is a strong contender for the Album of the Year award.
Content.
Content.
The customs official rummaged through the contents of his briefcase. Most of the gallery's contents were damaged in the fire.
She kept the contents of the letter a secret.
The program automatically creates a table of contents.
He cast his eye down the contents page. He cast his eye down the contents page.
The fat content of cheese.
Water with a low salt content. The content of the media course includes scripting, editing and camera work.
The graphics are brilliant. It's just a shame the content is so poor.
Andy was a good husband, and Nikki was clearly very content.
We'll be content with a respectable result in tomorrow's match. She sat quietly, content to watch him working.
He seemed quite content to let Steve do the talking.
Dr. Belson had been more than content for them to deal with any difficulties.
Not content with her new car, Selena now wants a bike.
She took refuge in the library, where she could read to her heart's content.
Mr. Lal has been asking for more responsibility, but has had to content himself with a minor managerial post.
I was no longer satisfied with the life that had hitherto contented me. I was no longer satisfied with the life that had hitherto contented me.
Contented.
Contented.
I felt warm, cosy, and contented. They lapsed into a contented silence.
He smiled contentedly.
Contention.
Contention.
A main contention is that doctors should do more to encourage healthy eating.
The issue of hunting is a source of contention. Owen's goal kept England in contention. Owen's goal kept England in contention.
Injury has put him out of contention for the title. Injury has put him out of contention for the title.
Contentious.
Contentious.
Animal welfare did not become a contentious issue until the late 1970s. Animal welfare did not become a contentious issue until the late 1970s.
Contest.
Contentment.
Contentment.
He gave a sigh of contentment and fell asleep. A feeling of deep contentment.
Contest.
Contest.
The bitter contest for the Republican presidential nomination. Stone decided to hold a contest to see who could write the best song.
I only entered the contest for fun.
It is clear that the election will be a close contest. The 1960 contest between Kennedy and Nixon.
The 1975 Liberal Leadership Contest.
I think you're the best rider here, no contest.
His brothers are contesting the will.
His wife is contesting a seat on the council. His wife is contesting a seat on the council.
His brothers are contesting the will.
Contestant.
Contestant.
Context.
Context.
The political context of the election.
To appreciate what these changes will mean, it is necessary to look at them in context.
These incidents are best understood in the broader context of developments in rural society.
The meaning of mad depends on its context. The meaning of mad depends on its context.
His comments taken out of context seem harsh. His comments taken out of context seem harsh.
Contextual.
Contextual.
Contextualize.
Contextualize.
The essays seek to contextualize Kristeva's writings.
Contiguous.
Contiguous.
America's 48 contiguous states.
Continents. Continents.
Continent.
Continent.
The continents of Asia and Africa.
Continental.
Continental. The warming up of continental interiors.
A continental-style cafe.
Continental holidays.
Continental breakfast.
Continental breakfast.
Continental drift.
Continental drift.
Continental quilt.
Continental quilt.
Continental shelf.
Continental shelf.
Contingency.
Contingency.
A contingency plan.
Add up your outgoings, putting on a bit more for contingencies.
Contingent.
Contingent.
Further investment is contingent upon the company's profit performance. Further investment is contingent upon the company's profit performance. Has the Scottish contingent arrived yet? A large contingent of troops was dispatched.
Continual.
Continual.
5 weeks of continual rain.
The Japanese business philosophy of continual improvement. The Japanese business philosophy of continual improvement.
She has endured house arrest and continual harassment by the police. She has endured house arrest and continual harassment by the police. We are continually reassessing the situation.
Continuance.
Continuance.
The continuance in power of the Nationalist Party.
Continuation.
Continuation. The present economic policy is a continuation of the earlier one.
Measures to ensure the continuation of food supplies.
The Baltic Sea is a continuation of the North Sea.
Continuation school.
Continuation school.
Continue.
Continue.
Sheila continued to work after she had her baby.
He will be continuing his education in the US.
I felt too sick to continue. The flood of refugees continued unabated. He was permitted to continue with his work while in prison.
The strike continued for another 4 weeks.
Most elderly people want to continue living at home for as long as they can.
After a brief ceasefire, fighting continued.
Rescue teams will continue the search tomorrow.
He picked up his book and continued reading. We continued along the road for some time.
The road continues northwards to the border.
Miss Silva will continue as publishing director.
And so, he continued, we will try harder next time.
Continued.
Continued.
Threats to the continued existence of the species.
Continued press speculation.
Continuing education.
Continuing education.
Continuity.
Continuity.
We should ensure continuity of care between hospital and home. Continuity announcer.
Continuity announcer.
Continuo.
Continuo.
Continuous.
Continuous.
Continuous economic growth.
A continuous flow of information.
UMNO had ruled Malaysia continuously since independence.
Continuum.
Continuum.
The Creole language is really various dialects arranged on a continuum.
All the organisms in an ecosystem are part of an evolutionary continuum.
Contort.
Contort.
His face was contorted with rage.
His body contorted in agony.
Contortion.
Contortion.
I could not force my body into the contortions required by classical ballet.
Facial contortions.
Involuntary muscle contortion.
He went through a series of amazing contortions to get Karen a work permit.
Contortionist.
Contortionist.
Contour.
Contour.
The contours of the hills. The contours of her face.
Contoured.
Contoured.
Contoured seats.
Contra. Contra.
Contraceptive devices.
Contraband.
Contraband.
A cargo of contraband. Contraband cigarettes.
Contrabass.
Contrabass.
Contraception.
Contraception.
The pill is a popular method of contraception.
Contraceptive.
Contraceptive.
Contraceptives. Contraceptives. A contraceptive device.
Contract.
Contract.
Tyler has agreed a 7-year contract with a Hollywood studio.
A 3-year contract to provide pay telephones at local restaurants. The firm operates schools under contract to state education authorities.
Employees who refuse to relocate are in breach of contract.
They put a contract out on him and he's in hiding. They put a contract out on him and he's in hiding.
Metal contracts as it cools.
The economy has contracted by 2.5% since last year.
2/3 of the adult population there have contracted AIDS. 2/3 of the adult population there have contracted AIDS.
They are contracted to work 35 hours a week. They are contracted to work 35 hours a week.
The company that had been contracted to build the models.
Doctors control their budgets and contract with hospitals for services.
Most of the marriages were contracted when the brides were very young.
We contract in cleaning services.
The rules require all members to contract in.
We contracted the catering out to an outside firm.
Contract bridge.
Contract bridge.
Contraction.
Contraction.
The contraction of metal as it cools.
Haven't is a contraction of have not.
Contractor.
A roofing contractor.
Contractual.
Contractual.
Tutors have a contractual obligation to research and publish.
Contradict.
Contradict.
Deborah opened her mouth to contradict, but closed it again.
Dad just can't bear to be contradicted.
The article flatly contradicts their claims.
The witness statements contradict each other, and the facts remain unclear. Within 5 minutes, he had contradicted himself twice.
Contradiction.
Contradiction.
Apparent contradictions in the defendant's testimony.
A contradiction between the government's ideas and its actual policy.
You can say what you like without fear of contradiction.
Permanent revolution is a contradiction in terms.
Your behaviour is in direct contradiction to the principles you claim to have. Your behaviour is in direct contradiction to the principles you claim to have.
Contradictory.
Contradictory.
The public is being fed contradictory messages about the economy. Contradistinction.
Contradistinction.
Plants in contradistinction to animals.
Contraflow.
Contraflow.
A contraflow is in operation between junctions 6 and 12.
Contrail.
Contrail.
Contraindication. Contraindication.
In his case, steroids are contraindicated.
Contralto.
Contralto.
Contraption.
Contraption.
A bizarre contraption.
Contrariwise.
Contrariwise.
Contrary.
Contrary.
It wasn't a good thing. On the contrary, it was a huge mistake.
I suppose your wife doesn't understand you. On the contrary, she understands me very well. Are they happy? No, quite the contrary.
Unless there is evidence to the contrary, we ought to believe them.
He continued to drink, despite advice to the contrary.
Two contrary views emerged.
The men shouted contrary orders.
The government's actions are contrary to the public interest.
Contrary to popular belief, a desert can be very cold.
Evans was his usual contrary self. Evans was his usual contrary self.
Contrast.
Contrast.
While there are similarities in the two cultures, there are also great contrasts.
The economic and social contrast between the poor and the rich.
The marble is smooth and polished, making a strong contrast with the worn stonework around it.
The birth rate for older women has declined, but by contrast, births to teenage mothers have increased. The birth rate for older women has declined, but by contrast, births to teenage mothers have increased.
The stock lost 60 cents a share, in contrast to last year, when it gained 21 cents.
The winter heat wave in California is a stark contrast to the below-freezing temperatures on the East Coast.
The spirited mood on Friday was in sharp contrast to the tense atmosphere last week.
The approach to learning at this school stands in marked contrast to the traditional methods used at other schools nearby. The approach to learning at this school stands in marked contrast to the traditional methods used at other schools nearby.
The sauce is quite sweet, so add dried thyme as a contrast. The red stems of his brush provide a contrast to the drab brown of the winter garden. The red stems of his brush provide a contrast to the drab brown of the winter garden.
This button adjusts the contrast.
The artist has used contrast marvelously in his paintings.
The snow was icy and white, contrasting with the brilliant blue sky.
These results contrast sharply with other medical tests carried out in Australia. In another passage, Melville again contrasts the land with the sea.
An essay comparing and contrasting Verdi and Wagner and their operas. An essay comparing and contrasting Verdi and Wagner and their operas. An essay comparing and contrasting Verdi and Wagner and their operas.
Contrasting.
Contrasting.
A blue shirt with a contrasting collar.
Contravene.
Contravene.
Some portions of the bill may contravene state law.
Contravention.
Contravention.
Sending the troops was a contravention of the treaty.
Several of the girls were wearing trousers, in contravention of the school rules on dress.
Contretemps.
Contretemps.
Contribute.
Contribute.
City employees cannot contribute to political campaigns.
The volunteers contribute their own time to the project.
Stress is a contributing factor in many illnesses. Stress is a contributing factor in many illnesses.
Alcohol contributes to 100,000 deaths a year in the U.S.
His work contributed substantially to our knowledge of the disease and how to treat it.
One of several authors contributing to the book.
Contribution.
Contribution.
Einstein was awarded the Nobel Prize for his contribution to quantum theory.
The school sees its job as preparing students to make a contribution to society. Walco made outstanding contributions to children's medicine.
A campaign contribution.
A contribution of £25 will buy 15 books.
Contributions to charities are tax deductible.
You can make annual contributions of up to $1,000 in education savings accounts.
Income tax and national insurance contributions.
Have you been making regular contributions to a pension plan?
A magazine with contributions from well-known travel writers.
A Christmas album featuring contributions from Carly Simon, Amy Grant, and others.
All the money has been raised by voluntary contribution.
Contributor.
Contributor.
Campaign contributors.
Dr. Wynne was a major contributor to the research. A regular contributor to Time magazine.
Cars are still one of the principal contributors to air pollution. Contributory.
Contributory.
Smoking is a contributory factor in lung cancer.
Contributory negligence.
Contributory negligence.
Contric.
Contric.
Contrite.
Contrite.
A contrite apology. Contrivance.
Contrivance.
A ridiculous series of plot contrivances moves the film along. Harriet's matchmaking contrivances.
A steam-driven contrivance used in 19th century factories.
Contrive.
Contrive.
Schindler contrived to save more than 1,000 Polish Jews from the Nazis.
The lawsuit says oil companies contrived the oil shortage in the 1970s.
In 1862, a technique was contrived to take a series of photographs showing stages of movement.
Contrived.
Contrived.
The characters are as contrived as the plot.
Control.
Control.
The disease robs you of muscle control.
Babies are born with very little control over their movements.
Artists like to have some control over where their works are hung in a gallery. Artists like to have some control over where their works are hung in a gallery. She's a good teacher who has control of her class.
Students are encouraged to take control of their own learning, rather than just depending on the teacher.
Excessive drinking can make you lose control of your own life. Do you need any help? No, it's under control, thanks.
Dogs are allowed on the trails if they are kept under control. Dogs are allowed on the trails if they are kept under control. The car spun out of control and hit a tree. The car spun out of control and hit a tree.
Flight delays do occur for reasons that are outside our control.
The press was freed from political control.
Jordan asked for editorial control of the project.
Anti-government forces are still in control of the area.
By the end of the year, the rebels had control over the Northern Territories.
The Johnson family has effective control of the company, owning almost 60% of the shares.
China gained control of the island in 1683. His son is being trained to take control of the family business. The college was under the control of a group of trustees.
The whole of this area came under Soviet control after World War II.
The Conservatives are hoping to regain control of the city council.
Pest control. The control of inflation.
The authorities impose strict controls on the movement of cattle.
An agreement on arms control.
Firefighters had the blaze under control by 9:44 p.m. Shay used diet and exercise to bring her weight under control.
The Federal Reserve Bank raised interest rates to keep inflation under control.
Rent controls ensured that no one paid too much for housing.
The introduction of tighter controls on immigration.
Police used fire hoses and dogs for crowd control. There were sudden tears in his eyes, and he paused, fighting for control.
Davidson lost control of himself and started yelling.
Small children can't be expected to have the same self-control as an adult.
Her voice is under control, but she is almost shaking with anger.
I felt calm and in control.
The TV remote control.
The volume control on the radio. A car with manual controls.
Belton, at the controls, made a perfect landing.
Air traffic control.
Please stop at passport control.
Computers used for stock control.
A control group of non-smoking women was compared to 4 groups of women smokers.
Press Ctrl and F2 to exit.
The Democrats continued to control the Senate until last year.
A huge company controlling half the world's coffee trade.
A chemical used to control weeds.
An economic plan to control inflation.
Development in areas of outstanding natural beauty is strictly controlled.
Strict measures were taken to control the spread of foot and mouth disease.
Police had to be called in to control the crowds.
A skilled rider controlling a spirited horse.
Sarah took a deep breath, trying to control her anger.
He controlled the urge to laugh.
Newman controlled himself with an effort. Newman controlled himself with an effort.
A radio-controlled toy car.
A thermostat controls the temperature in the building. A thermostat controls the temperature in the building.
The valves in the heart control how quickly the blood is pumped around the body. The valves in the heart control how quickly the blood is pumped around the body.
The company strictly controls the quality of its products.
Control freak.
Control freak.
Control key.
Control key.
Controllable.
Controllable.
Diabetes is a serious but controllable disease.
Controlled.
Controlled.
A test held under controlled conditions.
A controlled explosion.
Access to the site is closely controlled. A police search for controlled drugs. A controlled, authoritative voice.
Controlled experiment.
Controlled experiment.
A controlled experiment to determine the effects of light on plant growth.
Controlled substance.
Controlled substance.
An arrest for the possession and sale of controlled substances. An arrest for the possession and sale of controlled substances.
Controller. Controller.
Air traffic controllers.
Controlling.
Controlling. She wanted to get away from her controlling parents.
Controlling interest.
Controlling interest.
The firm paid over $10 million for a controlling interest in 5 hotels.
Control room.
Control room.
The submarine's control room.
Control tower.
Control tower.
Controversial.
Controversial.
The controversial issue of welfare reform.
A highly controversial plan to flood the valley in order to build a dam.
He is a controversial figure in the art world.
Controversy.
Controversy.
A political controversy.
The controversy surrounding Skinner's theories.
The judge's decision provoked controversy.
The controversy over campaign finance issues.
Controversy arose over the use of the chemicals on crops.
Contusion. Contusion. Conundrum. Conundrum.
The conundrum of our purpose on earth.
Conurbation.
Conurbation.
Convalesce.
Convalesce.
The time needed to convalesce after an operation.
Convalescence.
Convalescence.
A long and painful convalescence.
Convalescent. Convalescent.
Convalescent home.
Convalescent home.
Convect.
Convect.
Convection.
Convection.
Convection oven.
Convection oven. Convector.
Convector.
Convene.
Convene.
A report by experts convened by the National Institutes of Health.
Convener.
Convener.
Convenience.
Convenience.
Ready meals sell well because of their convenience.
Most of us like the convenience of using credit cards to buy things.
For convenience, the German translation is printed below.
These meals can be prepared in advance and served at your convenience.
For your convenience, the bank is open until 7 p.m.
Services should be run to suit the convenience of the customer, not the staff.
The supermarket offers a bag packing service as a convenience to customers.
A hotel with all the modern conveniences.
We should be grateful if you would reply at your earliest convenience. In the past, most royal marriages were marriages of convenience, arranged for political reasons.
Convenience food. Convenience food.
We eat too little fresh food, relying instead on convenience foods.
Convenience store.
Convenience store.
Convenient.
Convenient.
Mail-order catalogues are a convenient way to shop.
My secretary will call you to arrange a convenient time to meet. Is 3 o'clock convenient for you?
It is simple and convenient to use.
The bus stop around the corner is probably the most convenient. Restaurants convenient for shops and theatres.
Conveniently.
Conveniently.
Conveniently, her parents are often willing to babysit.
At that time, ice cream couldn't be conveniently bought in a store.
The hotel is conveniently located near the airport.
You conveniently forgot to tell me she was Nick's sister.
Conveniently.
Convener.
Convener.
Convent.
Convent.
Convention.
Convention.
A teacher's convention.
The city's new convention centre.
A convention for science fiction fans.
The European Convention on Human Rights.
Playing together teaches children social conventions such as sharing.
They defied the conventions of the time by living together without being married.
By convention, the bride's father gives her away at her wedding.
The Conventions of the 19th Century Novel.